the formality, but because it's streamed and online, I think there's a certain structure that we need to stick to. So just some housekeeping points from me. I'm Mike Elder, Independent Chair of the Pension Board. I'd like to welcome board members and members of the public to this virtual meeting of the board on the 14th of October at 10 a.m. The Vice Chair is Andrew Theobald, and Andrew will take over should I lose connection at any point. I have to say, I haven't lost connection today on any of my meetings, but there's always a first time, so Andrew would step in. I should welcome a new officer, Andy Gray, who's joined us from, I think, the Wandsworth Consortium, for want of a better word. I'm sure I've not given it full justice there, Andy. But Andy's taken over from David Kellen, and the really important job of Pensions Administration Manager. And I was explaining to Andy earlier, that's one of our core functions, if you like, is to keep a watchful eye on pensions admin. Clearly, we're using technology to continue the work of the board. I hope everything runs smoothly. If we hit any problems, Sharon's there to sort us out, but please be patient. And of course, as we talked earlier, it is being streamed live on the council's website. Before we move to our first item of business, I will ask Sharon to confirm which members are in the virtual room in attendance. And also remind members, if you have any declarations of interest, could you confirm this using the meeting chat function? And I will come to you to make your declaration. So Sharon, if you just confirm who we've got in the room, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So in the virtual meeting room this morning, I can see the Vice Chair, Mr. Andrew Theobald. I can see Mr. Michael Curran, Mr. Chris Reeves, and Angela Russell, who is an employer's representative. I have not received any apologies, so I haven't heard yet from Mr. William Cody. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you for that. And are there any declarations of interest anyone want to flag up? No, thank you. Okay, we've done apologies for absence. Just a few points just to make sure that we're successful. There's no exempt items on our pension board agenda, but there are some exempt items on the pensions committee's agenda. And I know some of us had trouble getting into those exempt items. I certainly have, and I think Michael probably had. But we'll just have to try and sort that out for future reference. Sharon was explaining it has to go through that secure link, but I had a bit of trouble with it. So we'll probably be fairly light on comments on the exempt agenda on the main committee. But if you do want raise any items on exempt agenda, then we'll have to go into closed session on that. Okay. Just a couple of further housekeeping points. Could I remind you, when you're not speaking, turn your camera off and your microphone off just to protect the bandwidth. I'll allow plenty of time for members to speak on items, and I'll make this clear as we go through the agenda. Please, could you only speak when I call on you to do so? And when you speak, if you could turn the camera on. When you speak the first time, could you just state your name clearly and introduce yourselves, and officers to do the same with their job titles as well. If you want to raise a point, then please use the chat box and just type in question and I'll pick you up from there. If by any reason you can't get hold of the chat box, I think Michael might have a problem because he's on his mobile, then just put your camera on and wave furiously at me and I'll make sure I'll pick you up. Okay, let's go on to the minutes of the previous meeting. I'll take them as whether they're a true reflection first of all. So, and then I'll do actions arising after that. So if we move to, I've got page numbering always varies, doesn't it, on these things? But if I move to page 3 of the agenda, which is the first page of the minutes of the 25th of June, that of course was a virtual meeting. So page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6. So everyone happy to accept them as a fair reflection of the meeting. And I'd just like to welcome Victoria, who's joined us, who I'm sure is more than able deputy for Richard Simpson. So welcome, Victoria, and sorry we meet in these straightened times, but so the minutes are agreed. Matters arising. Any matter? I've got one matter arising. Anyone got any other matters arising before I take my own? No. No, I can't see any. Yeah, I was asked to write, if you remember, looking at the terms of reference. I raised the issue of a remuneration strategy, and I did write to Richard Simpson, the Director of Finance, setting out the reasons why I felt this was important. And a lot of it was around the regulators' focus on the boards rather than the main committee, and the skills and knowledge requirements, and the, I think, quite onerous responsibilities we have on breaches of legislation. To cut a long exchange, Richard really couldn't see. I should choose my words carefully. Richard wasn't supportive of a remuneration strategy. I think I'll leave it there. A little bit disappointed, but clearly he's got his own reasons with it within the Sutton governance. I do think, though, it's something that we may return to in due course. So by remuneration strategy, I meant paying a small allowance to those members of the board who are not remunerated through their employer or through the union. But if anyone wants to pursue that, rather than put Victoria on the line, I think we'll wait for Richard to attend. And Richard's given his apologies today. I'd forgotten that these meetings clash on a Wednesday with his main corporate management board. So he has asked if we could move perhaps to a Thursday or a Monday or in future. So Sharon, that's something perhaps we could pick up. So okay, that does the minutes. Now we move on to what is the most exciting item on the agenda. Andrew, no pressure there. And that's a member development item on cybersecurity, and really the push for this come really from the pensions regulator, who's increasingly focused on this. And Andrew, I think we'll hand over to you. Shall we take questions at the end of your presentation?
Yes, that'd probably be easiest. Yeah. So
over to you.
Okay, all right, thanks very much. Yes, my name's Andrew Kelly. I'm head of digital and IT delivery for Sutton and Kingston. We're a shared service. So part of my responsibility is to look after the operational side of IT, including security, cyber security, to be precise. So I'm going to do a little presentation to just give you some background on some of the measures that we've got in place that help us keep secure. And if you give me a second, I'll just present my screen. Oops. I'll be there in a second. While I'm presenting, I won't be able to see anybody. So if there is a question you want to raise, shout, or at the end, I'll have time for questions. So, sorry, hold on a second. I'm doing it on a laptop with a very sensitive touchpad, so I just pressed the wrong button.
Aha, we're on, Andrew.
Right, so hopefully everybody can see cyber security. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Right, thank you. Yeah, that's good because I can't see anybody. But right, yeah, this is, as I said, a short presentation just to give a little assurance of the measures that we have in place with regard to cyber security. So first of all, I mean, this is an informal presentation, but what do we mean by cyber security? The main thing is really you only want people who are authorised to do so to access your information. So not people either within the council or external who are not supposed to be accessing it. Unauthorized access could be malicious, or it could just be someone doing something, having a snoop within the council or external, basically not what they're supposed to. Another key thing to cybersecurity is you have to make sure the information is actually available when needed. There have been cyber attacks on organisations and companies that have rendered people's information unusable, i.e. corrupt. So that's one of the things that we have to guard against. To actually effectively combat cyber attacks and keep information secure, it's very important that we have proper governance over our cyber security within the council, and that staff are aware of their responsibilities and what cyber security is about. And finally, if it does happen, and it could happen that there was an information or a security breach, we need to know what to do if it has happened. So I'll run through those in a bit more detail now. As far as governance goes within the council, there is Sutton Council Information Security Governance Board, which meets, I think, every two months. That's chaired by Richard Simpson, and it has representatives of all parts of Sutton Council. I attend that, or if I'm not there, the Assistant Director in charge of IT, who's my boss, Steve O'Connor, he attends. The Security Board runs a risk register for the council, which has got specific entries for IT and cyber security on it. We also have a data protection officer, Rhianne Allen, who works within the IT area, who's responsible for information security in general, but reports to the ICO, maintains our compliance with GDPR and things like that. Within IT itself, we have an IT security board which meets every month. We just met yesterday, actually. That's chaired by the AD in charge of IT, Steve O'Connor, and the data protection officer, myself, and all representatives of the key areas of IT meet in that meeting. We run our own risk register in that meeting, which we review regularly, and we bring items for approval, so changes to IT systems that might have a security implication, to that board for approval. It's all minuted and recommendations passed up to the relevant council. Also within IT, we have in the technical support area a team that is not solely, but part of their job is to look after cyber security. They're technically expert in things like firewalls, antivirus, identifying cyber attacks and that sort of thing. They monitor lots of systems, internal systems and external data sources, to alert us if there is any attacks that could be coming our way, and run regular reports to make sure that we're clean. We also have within IT a specialist cybersecurity consultant who is employed on a 2-day per month basis, who is, as I said, he's specialist security consultant, but he's on the panel and boards of security, cybersecurity with other councils and lots of government organisations. So we get inside information via that route. The final two items to go within governance are, we have a security and an acceptable usage policy within the council, which everybody signs up to when they start, and there's a refresh sign up that goes on every year. We also have data breach and cyber incidents policies and procedures, which are published on the intranet. So this is obviously the Pensions Board, if that's the correct term. So the specific IT systems that are relevant here, we have some that are hosted in the cloud and some that are hosted, as they say, on premise, so in our buildings somewhere. The ones that we have in the cloud is Google G Suite. So this covers everybody's email, their documents and spreadsheets, video conferencing that we're using now, and general collaboration tools. The systems that we have hosted on premise, in particular, we have the Civica pension system, and we have the finance system. There are some others like the HR system, but those perhaps are the two main ones for concern here. So if we look at the protective measures in place for the Google G Suite, Google is an enterprise level system on a par with those run by Oracle and Microsoft. All of the information is encrypted within their data centers. They have a lot of failover processes in place, automated backups, disaster recovery built in. Obviously, there's an awful lot of big corporations that use Google, banks, governments, all sorts of things. So we can be fairly confident that they have got corporate level setups in place. With Google G Suite, we use something called two-factor authentication. One of the key measures to have in place if you're protecting against cyber attack is some strong authentication. So just to explain, that means to log in to your Google account and get your email or get to your documents, you have to put in your username, a password, but you also need to use a second factor, which is a unique code that is generated on an application that runs on your phone. So you need your username, your password, and you need to have your phone with a special application on it with a special number, which changes every minute. That means that somebody could perhaps gain your password, but unless they also got your phone and were able to log on to your phone, they wouldn't be able to get into your account. We use within Sutton Chromebooks as our standard end user device. These are regarded as very secure. Unlike Windows, they're very, very cut down. They have built-in virus protection. They're encrypted and have a very low, what they call a low attack vector. There's very little for hackers to try and hack into. It's not, I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's much better than Windows devices. Finally, I should say that all of the Google G Suite access, all user access, is controlled centrally by a central IT team. All new users are logged, all changes in all access control are logged, recorded and reviewed. So that's Google. The on-premise systems are a slightly different beast. They're all located in data centers within Sutton buildings, Sutton Council buildings. All of the data centers have secure locks and card controls on them, which means only IT staff that have been authorized can get into them. We also can see who has accessed and at what time. So it's very controlled. We run something here which some people may have come across called Modern Desktop. Basically, that is the server environment that hosts the pension system, and Aggresso, the finance system, that environment is ring-fenced and is regarded as highly secure. It's behind 2 layers of firewalls. It has antivirus protection running on it. In addition, you need to use a separate 2-factor authentication, as I described before, but a separate password and a separate device number to be able to log into it, which means it's even more secure than the G Suites. We have, of course, all of our systems on premise are backed up every night. And we also have what's called disaster recovery procedures in place. So if the whole of the Sutton data center were to flood or to blow up or be compromised in some way, all of the data is actually replicated to a second data center in another location, which we can then bring all those systems back up again, and users would be able to access from either Sutton buildings or remotely as they can now. All systems on premise are monitored, and there are alerts set for any suspicious or unusual behavior, and things like running out of disk space, all of that sort of thing gets measured, gets monitored, and we get alerted prior to there being any issue. And then the actual access for the pension system, in addition to all of this, is handled by the business, the service area, I should say. So the people that actually know best who should have what access to what parts of the system have got complete control over that. So that's what we're doing. Obviously, you need to have some checks and balances to make sure that what we're doing stands up. We have to comply with PS. Well, I'll go through them one by one. PSN is the public service network. It's a government run network which local authorities, health organisations can connect to, but to do so, you are audited to be PSN compliant. We are audited every year, and we have a complete clean bill of health with PSN. PCI is for credit card details and so forth. We also get audited for that from a these are all from a security point of view. We get audited on that front as well, and we have compliance with PCI as well. We also have Cyber Essentials, which is a government-run scheme to independently audit whether your controls and measures in place are adequate. We have, again, every year we recertify with Cyber Essentials, the government certification. And finally, we also are a member of the NCSC, which is the National, I have to think carefully now, the National Cyber Security Committee, or it might be Council actually. That is run by the government. It issues advice, warnings on security issues. They also provide a number of tools for assessing your cybersecurity status, which we use, of which we use all of those. On top of all of this, we run, we have an external company run quarterly vulnerability tests and penetration tests from the outside to check that nothing from the outside can compromise or can gain access to anything on our internal network. We run our own internal monthly scans on top of this, and anything that we find, we follow up on straight away. Next item, I mentioned awareness. It's quite key that it's not just IT that have to look after the security of the council's information. It's everybody within the council, so all staff. It's actually written into your contract. It's part of the security policy. It states you must look after council information, and to facilitate this, we have robust security policies in place, acceptable use policies as well for using IT equipment and the internet. All staff, as I said earlier, sign up to that when they join. We do periodic staff training as well. There's a digital platform that we use for people to do online training on a yearly basis to re-comply, to verify that they're aware of what they need to know. In IT, we have via the intranet and a separate communications channel we call the Launchpad, and also using Google Currents, which is, if you're not aware, is a bit like a corporate Facebook, only accessible by the council. We issue security hints and tips on a regular basis. So as and when we discover that there might be something in the wild, like someone trying to do a scam to get people's bank details, that sort of thing, we will publish warnings on that and give people hints and tips as to what they can do to avoid that sort of cyber attack. And as I said, alerts, anything that's currently live in the wild on the internet, if we think it's relevant, we will publish that on the intranet and via these channels for staff. Oh, that's questions. Sorry, I rattled through that a little quickly. Hopefully that was okay, but does anybody have any questions?
Right, I've got Michael, kick on.
Thank you, Mike. Quick question. What's your policy on software updates? You haven't mentioned that. You must have several operating systems other than the Google platform.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah, no, that's a good point. Right. I suppose I did slightly rush the slides in time for this meeting. Yes, we have a patching policy which covers all hardware, firmware, operating systems on servers, etc. We keep up with the Microsoft Patch Tuesday monthly patches and out-of-band patches that come out for sort of urgent security reasons, not just with Microsoft, but with all of our suppliers. We have close links with people like Citrix, Cisco, Google, Microsoft. So we get alerted when there's something urgent, but as a matter of course, we are patching all servers. We do run more than just Google. Yes, we have Microsoft server-based systems.
Okay.
Just a supplementary on that. The Civica system, which must have updates of its own, do you test those on a test system before applying them? Or do you go live on advice from the supplier?
Right. As far as the technical installation goes, yeah, we can test those on a test system. I mean, Bradley may be able to give a little more detail on within the application itself, because I'm not so au fait with that. But
yes, so yeah, we do test the releases that come from Civica to make sure they're not going to affect any of the processes and things that we've got. So they are subject to testing before they go into the live environment.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anyone else at this stage? Just one from me. I think that's been a really good resume, Andrew. There were two areas the regulator were interested in. One was the pensions admin system, Civica, and I think you've given us a real good reassurance on that. So very grateful for that. The other one, I guess, is very much more difficult, and Tamara might have a view on this, is our assets will be held by a custodian. And what reassurance do we have that the custodian system, I mean, I think probably JP Morgan, there'll be a massive corporate global one, and at one level you could think, well, I'm sure they've got good systems. But have we got any sort of reassurance from them on custodian?
It's Northern Trust, the custodian for Sutton, not JP Morgan.
Yeah, is it something Andrew would deal with, or Tamara? Is it something that, you know, when we set up the contract, there was disaster recovery spelled out, and you know, I'm fishing really on this one.
It's not something that that I've looked at in my time here. Yeah, it's something you do your initial due diligence on, and then periodically, I suppose you'd want to refresh that.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm going to suggest is we write to the custodian, just asking for their you know, policy on cyber security, put some words around it. Can they set out and reassure us? If we could frame a letter to them, I think we would then at least have an audit trail with the regulator. Should the regulator ever test us on this. And I'm not too sure what words to use. I think we are seeking reassurance that they have good cyber security processes and policies in place, like you would with, I don't know, your housing benefit or your council tax supplier and stuff like that. Is that something you could pick up?
Yeah, it's certainly something that they would have to provide to new clients when they're onboarding new clients. So they'll have a prepared pack of information. I guess it's who's going to be best equipped to review that information when we receive it.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think there's two options. Whether Andrew feels qualified to do it, but there's so much, you know, we're talking £700 million worth of assets here. You know, I'd encourage you, if I accept that those skills are difficult, there'll be people out there who do have those skills, and you know, it would be worth, I think, investing in some consultancy to get them to review the custodians' policies. You know, it's a lot of assets out there. I think the first stage is to find out what they've got, really.
Yeah, we can certainly write to them.
Sorry, I was just going to say I'm still a little new to the council still, so I wasn't around when you took it on. But we'd be quite happy to have a look at any they will have a cyber security and a service level statement that should outline all of these things. I'm quite happy to review anything.
Yeah, tomorrow.
Okay.
We got a volunteer. Thanks, Andrew. So
excellent.
Yeah,
okay, I will write to them and ask for their policies, and then I'll speak to Andrew about reviewing them.
Yeah, that's right.
And then
obviously, just from the IT point of view, I can't comment on the business side, but
no, I understand. If you reach a point where, hang on, I can only review this so far, then I think a discussion with Tamara and the team about what the board's looking for at the end of the day. It's not a detailed report back, but just something to say, look, we've followed this up, we've had these reassurances, blah blah blah. Okay, is everyone, Andrew, that's been a really good session. Thank you for that, and a difficult session, and one that certainly we felt we ought to have done, you know, before now. So you can either stay and we can enjoy your Beano wallpaper, or if you've got other things in life you want to get on with, that's entirely up to you.
Well, no, thanks very much. I will sign off. Thank you. It's nice to meet you all. I hope you have a nice rest of the meeting. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. Okay, let's go on to the review of pension committee papers. The next item on the agenda. Slightly disadvantaged, I couldn't get into the exempt appendix, but we'll pick that up at another time. But really, this is you know, sorry, I've probably gone out. So let me just go back to the main agenda, make sure I've not got it. Sorry, it's the pensions admin update is next. Sorry, that's oh no, it is the reviews. So too many papers. Yeah, the Review of Pensions Committee papers. So has anyone got any points? If I could just kick it off, and in there tomorrow, there was the impact of COVID-19. I thought that was a good report. I've seen it before. The cash flow analysis, which is one of our concerns, looks pretty robust in that. The investment performance rebounded quite nicely by the end of June, 14.2%. So that was pleasing to see. Whether the 30th of September will look quite as good, don't know. There was just a couple of points I had tomorrow, and that was on the work plan on item 12. Two items caught my eye. Was the 15th of December, cash flow and liquidity management, and the investment strategy statement then, and the London CIV presentation. So you could just enlighten me what the cash flow and liquidity management item is.
So we had asked Hymans to prepare a paper on both managing currency risk within the fund and also managing liquidity risk, looking at issues such as how we manage our cash, our day-to-day cash balances of the pension fund, but also going forward as we invest in more illiquid assets with irregular payment and drawdown profiles. We're getting cash calls from the fund managers, and we need to make sure we have the cash available at the right time to either to pay for a drawdown, or potentially if the project or underlying asset needs cash, they might come to the lenders, to the investors, and say, you know, we need to do another funding round. So we need to make sure we are able to respond to that as we go into more of these esoteric asset types. So we'd asked Hymans to prepare a paper on cash flow and liquidity management. It was quite a complex paper, and the committee asked to have a special session on it at the next meeting, to make sure they fully understood it.
Okay, thank you for that. Investment strategy, I wasn't able to get into the exempt appendix, but is that coming back again in December, that statement?
So the investment strategy itself is agreed, and the committee is receiving regular updates on the implementation plan. So exactly sort of which funds we will buy units and sell units in, and how we will affect the transfers, whether we'll try and do in specie transfers, and so forth, and how we'll manage the cash movements associated with it. The investment strategy statement, however, is the statement that we have to publish every 3 years that sets out all of our sort of policies, including the responsible investment policy and the currency policy and the cash management policy. And that's that. I think the last time it was updated was April 2017. So it is slightly overdue for review. So that's a document that we need to produce and agree at the committee.
Yeah, I think that's probably one that we might well be quite interested in as a board. So you just keep an eye on that one. The other thing I'd rattling around is the London CIV. Obviously, you get them in from time to time. It's whether we, at some future meeting, get the London CIV to talk to us. Now, I know there is an issue. They don't want to be talking to committees and boards, but I just wonder what your thoughts were on that.
It's an interesting one. I mean, they are in demand to present at every single London Borough's committee meetings at the moment. So it has been quite difficult to get them to present at committee. Yeah. However, there are separate teams within the London CIV who look at the things like fee transparency, who are perhaps maybe more interest to the board rather than the committee. And they are obviously sort of in less demand at committee level. So I think it might be worth having a conversation with them about some of the governance aspects of what the CIV do.
Yeah, that would. So if when we come on to work plan, perhaps we can keep that one in the.
Okay.
Sharon's just reminded me, actually, it is available in the video, the Pensions Committee YouTube. So I think that's helpful, Sharon. Our role on the Civ is just you know, an arm's length watching brief, isn't it, really? But yeah, so we can get on a YouTube video. So Sharon, how do we do that? We just we go on the Sutton website and find it?
Yeah, on the Sutton website, there's a playlist, so you can pick on any of the previous meetings. So if you go to the agenda link that I gave you for the agenda papers, you'll see the link to the meeting, and you can still click on that media link. So the videos are still available after if you wanted to watch the presentation that was made from the Civ at that time, if that helps.
That's very good, actually. That saves us. But I'll take Tamara's point that there might be specialist subject with less in-demand people might want to get out. But that's one thing.
They are actually always looking for feedback on things like their fee transparency initiatives.
Okay. Yeah.
So I think they would welcome that engagement.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's do that. Any other member before we stand down on this one? Okay. So let's now move on to one of our core items, which is pensions administration, which is item 8. So I'll hand over to Bradley, and it's a bit unfair on Andy to, I think Andy will be largely an observer, but Andy, feel free to chip in if Bradley lets you down at any point. Bradley, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, yeah, Andy will probably take a back seat on this one, but yeah, as the Chair said, Andy, if you want to pitch in, please feel free to do so. So we've got the report. I'll just pick out a few key points, and then probably best just to take questions from there. So key project, annual benefit statements, probably the most important project that we do all year. Important to get that right. So the deadline for that is the 31st of August. And we had 99.13% compliance, and no employers were missed at that date. So the remaining few members, they were dealt with. It was often that they didn't actually require an annual benefit statement, so that's why they didn't get one. So that's a really big success on that project, and I think improves on performance from previous years as well. It's fair to say that it had its challenges, again, with late returns from certain scheme employers, and so we're going to talk about the admin strategy in the next item, so we'll probably pick that up again when we talk about that item. Moving to performance, we've had good performance for the priority 1 and priority 2 tasks. The processes that are contained in those kind of bandings, that's set out in the report, but the priority 3s, that's the one where we still could do better on those. They are the lowest priority, hence their banding in priority 3, and they're largely back office, so the impact to actual members is low. So I think we can feel comfortable that the ones that are the most important are being dealt with, which are those priority 1s and priority 2 tasks. Obviously, Andy has joined. He joined last week, and so we've been inducting Andy into the team. He joins from Wandsworth, trying not to swamp him with too much too soon, but he's keen to get stuck in, and I know he's got plans for lots of improvements. Actually, just going back just slightly, just to the stats again, we are developing some new stats to help the board kind of see the processes, how we're actually dealing with them, and especially the statutory deadlines that are associated with some of those processes. Again, that gets picked up in the admin strategy, so we can go into more detail and have a look at what they might be going forward for the board as well. Another thing that related to performance is the data services. So I think in the past, the board has been keen for us to do some tracing of lost contacts. So we have signed up with a provider now to deliver that. So we'll be able to have those lost contact searches and address tracing. And they'll also be doing mortality screening for us as well. So we're in the process of setting those up, and then they will run regularly based on certain criteria. So that's another improvement to make sure that our member data is as accurate as possible. The final thing I'll talk about is McLeod, which is going to be a key word for the next couple of years, and cause a great deal of work for the team and scheme employers as well, it's fair to say, and their payroll providers. So I've set out kind of the situation that we find ourselves in. The first key deadline is recommended by the Scheme Advisory Board, which is the 31st of March next year, for the time when they recommend that scheme employers should have provided the missing data that we're going to require to do these new calculations. So it's not long, so we need to act quickly and communicate clearly with the scheme employers to let them know what the requirements are, and then and hopefully they're able to find all of the data. That's a whole other load of questions about what to do with missing data or data that doesn't exist at all. So that's going to be a massive project. We convened a project team and we met earlier this week for the first time, and we'll be meeting regularly to talk about this project. So we're going to have conversations about what resources are required to fulfill this project need, which is a one-off, although it's going to last for a little while, but also the kind of day-to-day resources that we're going to need to maintain at the same time, and talking to our software supplier, because clearly, where possible, we want to make use of bulk solutions to all of this, and validations for data checking, etc. So we're at the early stages of that, but we'll keep the boards regularly updated about the progress on that. So they're the points that I'd like to raise. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, any member? Thanks, Bradley. Andrew.
Thanks, Mike. Just a quick one. Bradley, if I'm asking you how long a piece of string is, please say. But I mean, the one thing I was thinking about, have we the slightest idea about the potential financial impact of the McLeod case?
Shall I just come in on
I was going to
that one?
Go tomorrow.
So we are discussing this at the moment with the auditors as part of the sign-off of the annual accounts. Obviously, the government's proposal on remedies for McLeod's is still at consultation stage, so it's impossible to give an absolute final amount. But having discussed it with the actuaries, they are not anticipating any further increase in past service costs beyond what's already been allowed for at the March 19 reporting date. So in terms of financial impact, it's actually relatively good news, as in no, we're not expecting there to be any further charge to the Sutton Fund. Obviously, it depends. The impact on different funds depends on the assumptions that the actuaries used in the past. So each actuary has taken a slightly different approach. But for Sutton, we're not expecting it to have to make any further contributions for McLeod specifically.
Okay, I mean, that's helpful. So what we're really looking at is an administrative impact rather than a financial, which obviously has an element of financial cost to it, but not an actually long-term financial one. Thanks very much. That's really helpful.
If I could go back to what Tamara was saying, on a granular level, it may affect certain employers more than others, depending on their age demographic. So if you've got a lower age group, it might the gearing of it may affect their employer rate more than others. So I think we need to be wary of the fact that we may get certain employers whose employer rate may increase because of this. But on a national level, I think actuaries have agreed, and tomorrow you can correct me if I'm wrong, that they're talking about perhaps 0.5% of liabilities across the piece across the UK.
Okay, thanks. Sorry, Tamara.
So yes, as Andy was saying, we have had one or two employers who've, well, I think partly because the employer themselves hadn't followed the McLeod case in great detail, and so were unpleasantly surprised with the March 2020 adjustment required, even though in the grand scheme of things it wasn't necessarily a huge amount, but it was still an unpleasant surprise for them. And yes, the impact is skewed depending on the profile of your member base. So for some employers, it is slightly worse than for others.
Okay, can I just encourage you to, you know, I mean, Bradley said it's early days, you've only met this week, but a good resources plan is essential. And I'm teaching you to suck eggs here. And I know with the Kingston and Sutton board, I seem to have a memory that these things have to go to some sort of joint board, but our board, Pensions Board, would support additional resources on this. You know, it's got to be got right at the end of the day. And in terms of the fund's total asset base, it ain't a big cost. You know, if you've got to get extra staff in, we'd encourage you to do that. So, yeah, that clearly is the big issue going forward. I'm pleased to see you're still working on the KPI. So thank you for that, Bradley. And we look forward to that perhaps at our next meeting. There's no more issues on that. Let's go on to the pensions administration. Sharon, can you take it as a given that I'm not very good at repeating the recommendations, but assume they've all been approved to date?
Yeah, the recommendation on this one was just to note, so it's fine that you don't read it. It's more if we're asking the board to agree something, it's helpful to just read it out so they're clear on what they're agreeing, if that's okay.
Okay, thank you. Pensions administration strategy. Bradley, a few words on that.
Yes, sure. Yeah, again, I'll just pull out a few key points. So this is a strategy that already exists, but it was due for review. So we've used that opportunity to revamp it. And we've concentrated on 3 areas there. So we've made it clearer about the roles and responsibilities for each of the various parties to the scheme. And that includes service targets for the pensions admin team. And I'm going to refer to a page in the pack just to show you about those stats. So it is on page 29.
Okay, yeah.
Just to
oh, yes.
page. So that's got the performance standards for processing tasks. And as I mentioned, that breaks down the statutory processes into different sections. So we have our service target, the things that we're actually in control of, the overall process target, which reflects the scheme employer's part as well. So they might have to submit a form, for example, to us by a certain deadline, and then the legal deadline. And what we're going to do is we're going to report on each of those. So we'll give you compliance figures for all of those. So you'll be able to see, for example, if we are meeting our service target, but the overall process target is going beyond the deadline for that, then that will highlight an issue with scheme employers providing forms, for example. So it will allow us to delve into the data in more detail and come up with some recommendations. So that's one of the changes that we're making, and so that sets that out nicely in that strategy now. Going back to the actual report, the next part is about the communication strategy. So we didn't actually have a clear communication strategy, so that's new and that's been added into this document, which is a requirement that we have that. So that's now ticked off. We have that. And then the last thing is we've expanded the recoverable costs section to make it clearer about where those costs may arise, and to also strengthen the penalties that are available for scheme employers that don't meet their requirements. So we did consult with all of the scheme employers about this, and regrettably we had no formal response. I did have a few informal conversations, and the people that I did speak to were supportive of the new strategy, but sadly no formal response to that. So the strategy went to the committee and was approved there. It's also going to the committee in Kingston because it's a joint strategy, and so we're just waiting for that final sign off. But once that's done, we'll then be communicating the final version of the strategy with all of the scheme employers, and it will become live at that point.
Okay, thank you, Bradley. Any member Andrew.
Yeah, just one question, Bradley. I mean, I'm looking at those service target standards, and the response times, but I noticed, for example, the very first one, send a notification of joining the LGPS to a scheme member 20 working days from receipt of all information. Now, okay, I can understand it's going to take basically a month to process the information. I don't have a huge problem with that, but there's nothing in there that I could see that talks about an acknowledgement to the inquirer saying, yes, we've got your inquiry. This is the time scale in which we expect to be able to deliver, to answer your request. And this is, as I said, when it says receipt of all information, something about how long do you anticipate it's going to take to receive all that information? Because that sometimes, if you're getting it from another scheme, can take months, if not years in some cases.
Sure. Yeah. So I think where someone communicates actively with us, so they send us an email, for example, and they're requesting something, they will get an automated response from us, and that is going to link to this document once it is live. At the moment, I think it gives some generic turnaround time, but we're going to highlight this and refer people so they can see those deadlines that we're going to work around. That's going to help manage those expectations of the members that are contacting us, especially where we are awaiting information from a third party, like a scheme employer, for example. That first one there, the joiner one, is kind of an automatic process that happens as someone joins. So rather than someone requesting that, it's something that would happen in the background for them, and then they would receive notice once we've done the processing.
Fine, okay. It's just that I think communication is absolutely paramount, and because I know some of the criticisms that have been levelled in the past is that inquirers make sort of contact, not you personally, but the department, and then nothing happens. It seems that they're going to black hole, and what they haven't got is the comfort of being able to have a named individual to ping an email to, say, what's going on, with my inquiry, and somebody come back and say, don't worry, we're still on it. Then I have some sort of family experience of that. So that's something which I think needs to be taken into consideration. But anyway, you've answered the point.
I think that's fair criticism, and I think managing expectations of people is really important. And we are going to be looking at the processes to see if we can improve them, so that, if, for example, we're waiting for information still from a third party, that when we request and chase that information, we also send an email or a notification to the member involved to say, we haven't forgot about you, still dealing with it, we're chasing the information on your behalf. As soon as we receive it, we'll action it. If we can build things in like that, then that actually benefits us, because we won't be dealing with the queries that are coming in from people to chase it. So, and it'll feel like, we are in control, we're chasing them, but if you're not hearing from us, you won't know that.
No, that answers my question. That would be excellent if that can be done. Thank you.
Okay, Bradley, just a couple of observations. I mean, you used your best endeavours, but it's disappointing, isn't it, to get so little response from employers. I suspect you will get a response once you start billing a few. It's inevitable. The other thing is under communications, and you've heard this from us before. You build all this online stuff, and we know the take up, I think, was stuck around below 30%, and it's just reminding you the need to. You build all this fantastic digital stuff. It's getting people to open it, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And we haven't lost sight of that. It's on the list of things that we can still try to improve. We're going to look at mandatory users for that. So if you're an active member, you should be set up on the online system rather than having to request it yourself. That will increase the take up of it, obviously, but then also making it worthwhile and easy to use when you do access it. So there's definitely work still to be done on all of that, and it's just it's on Andy's list.
Excellent. Yeah, we'll hold you to account on that one, Andy. But okay, so if there's no more on that, we'll move on to training and national LGPS knowledge assessment. Amongst the many exams that were cancelled, the one that wasn't cancelled was those brave board members who undertook the Hyman's assessment. To say it was challenging would be an understatement. But look, tomorrow I'll give you an intro. Get out of that one.
So yes, the level of engagement of the board was pretty good, actually. Certainly better than the committee. Just as a reminder, though, this assessment was intended to identify training needs across both the board and the committee as a whole, as a group. So it wasn't intended to be a test of individuals' knowledge, but rather to identify where, as a collective group, we might have some gaps, and therefore where we should focus our training going forward. So in that respect, it was that more members of the committee didn't survey, but yes, well done to those members of the board who did. There was a fair amount of feedback that some of the questions were a little pedantic and kind of exam technique focused, when they could have been perhaps sort of slightly more high level and conceptual. But I think they did cover the broad areas that the board and the committee need to know and understand. And I did it myself afterwards, and I found it quite useful, actually, to highlight some of the areas that where we do need to improve our knowledge. And the regulatory standards on knowledge and training are increasing exponentially. So this isn't something that's going to go away. We are going to have to keep ensuring that all of our committee and board members keep their skills and knowledge up to date. You'll have had a chance to read through the actual results. I think Sutton was broadly kind of middle of the pack in terms of overall results, and our profile of strengths and weaknesses was again very similar to the average. The training plan has been proposed by Hyman's, obviously is quite skewed towards the training that Hyman's would like to provide for us and bill us for. So perhaps take that with a bit of a pinch of salt. But I think there are definitely areas in governance and pensions administration and actuarial methods and valuations that we do need to cover. So the training plan is set out in the paper. We very much welcome any comments and any areas that you feel should be a priority for training over the next 12 months.
Okay, thank you, Tamara, and that was very eloquently expressed. So thank you for that. Any member before I make a few points? Yeah. I mean, I think it was quite onerous, and my big worry, it would actually scare people off ever setting foot on a pension board again, and I can fully understand that. A basic question: are we talking about joint training with the pensions committee? Because as you said, Hyman's will charge for this; they'll double up, and it's, of course, it may not always be Hyman's we want. There are a couple of areas which I think I would question. Procurement, for example, we as a board, we rely on the officers, they're the procurement experts. I'm not totally convinced we need detailed procurement training. And pensions accountant, you know, I'm an ex-director of finance, I read the bloody pension fund annual report, and it's all I can do to understand it. And I think we'd rely on an anorak in your accounting team to get on with that. So there's a couple of really technical areas I'm not sure are right, but look, you know, I'll go with the flow otherwise. But yeah, so it's really, are we talking about joint training? And B, do we, you know, some of the techie areas, do we actually need?
So just on the joint training point, this was discussed at the committee because they have their meetings in the evening. They were keen to keep training in the evening, whereas you have your meetings in the daytime, and presumably you would prefer to have the training in the daytime. Hopefully there will be some items of training that can be delivered by webinar, and therefore members can download it sort of at their convenience. But I do think it would be helpful to have some joint kind of interactive training where people can ask questions and engage with each other. I think it would also help strengthen the links between the committee and the board as well, so that there was a more of a collaborative feel to the work. So I would like to try and see if we can get a daytime session organised, because certainly some committee members will be able to make daytime sessions.
I've got Andrew flagging on the my experience for many years was that doing 45 minutes before the main pensions committee. I know members, particularly in London boroughs, a lot of them, well, not at the moment, would commute into town, which is why London boroughs have evening meetings. And I know we do get a member kickback, but quite often they wouldn't be in the best place to absorb this stuff at 6:30 or 7. If you can try and get, even if it's early evening, but I know there is a member issue about time and stuff. Andrew.
Thank you, Chair. My comments here may be slightly controversial as far as elected members are concerned, but frankly, I don't care, having been an elected member myself for 12 years. So I entirely agree with what you've just said, Chair, about twilight sessions. And as I am also a member of one of the council's statutory committees, I'm one of the church representatives on the People Committee, which doubles up as the Education Committee. And I've seen, frankly, the woeful attendance of elected members at these twilight sessions. It's funny enough, it's always the volunteers who come along. And usually, to be fair, the chairs or vice chairs of those committees, but the other members, frankly, don't bother. And what's the controversial bit is elected members actually get paid to do their job, whereas, of course, none of us, or with the exception of the chair, and he's worth every penny, and therefore, and I remember, because I was an elected member when the councillors' allowances came in back in 1999, 2000, and the whole purpose of paying elected members allowances was to compensate them for it was accepted that elected members could not do their job as a councillor if they were in full-time employment. And of course, a lot of them are not, but if they were in full-time employment, it would be difficult for them to fulfil their duties as a councillor because of their work situation. So the theory behind council allowances was most councillors are going to need to spend at least a day a week fulfilling their council duties during the daytime, and therefore that allowance was intended to compensate them for any loss of earnings that they would incur by actually fulfilling their councillors' duties. And employers have a statutory duty to allow elected councillors time off without pay to fulfil their duties. So the whole point of this diatribe is if elected members say, oh, we only want our meetings in the evening, I know it might be slightly difficult for officers to point out to them, actually, you're paid to do this, but perhaps that could be come from the Director of Finance, the Strategic Director of Finance, or indeed the Chief Executive of the Council. Mike's grinning and he knows exactly what I'm talking about. But from a point of view, particularly bearing in mind, we've already had a knockback about the possibility of members of this board being paid a small stipend. I think, and I suspect that's come more from the elected members perhaps than the officers. Therefore, there has to be a quid pro quo. Rent over.
I think Tamara, just to protect you, I wouldn't get involved in members. I think you've got the flavour of Andrew's thing, but it's very difficult for officers to comment on that. On the remuneration, I'm not sure that did go to members, to be fair. I think Richard had a strong view on that. All those points you put, Andrew, just then, I did put in an email to Richard, probably not in quite the same tone as that you put in there. But the points have been made, and I think we'll probably revisit remuneration. I think there's a growing trend towards it. And as we've seen here, the skills and knowledge is disproportionate on board members. And that was that all about. But look, I think, Tamara, what you can take away from this is that, look, it was a very useful exercise. And as you said, it highlighted gaps. I think generally we would be keen on joint sessions. We would prefer them during the day, but that's not entirely in your gift. And I think we understand that. So, and then we look forward to actually getting on with the training. Yeah.
Just on the actual content of the training plan, are there any comments on areas you would like to see focused on? Just on the procurement point as well, I do think it is quite important for the board to have some oversight of the procurement processes, because I don't think, you know, the committee is very focused on making the investment decisions and then has a sort of a responsibility to ensure that they are executed. But I think it's helpful for the board to have some scrutiny on how they are executed and whether they follow the right procurement processes. So I do think it is quite an important area.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I suppose the one that's missing from the board's, but it is a reminder what our role is, and I think we need to refresh every so often. And maybe the committee needs to understand what our role is as well. And that's one of the points you've just made that, you know, I probably missed that one. So if we could feed something in about the role of the board, it's got procurement and the committee's role, but specifically the board's role in governance, I think, somewhere along the line. I'm still not convinced about pensions accounting, but I'll have to I'll bow to a superior force on that one.
I mean, I think it is the committee that really needs more detailed understanding of the valuation process, because they have to make decisions around funding contributions, and approving the process. Those valuations.
This is actually the accounting process, unless they mean the valuation process.
It's primarily the valuation process I think they're talking about here.
I think that is key, but yeah, if you can weave something in around the board's role in the governance of the fund, I think that would be helpful. But, okay, well,
and that role is changing, isn't it? So I think that's something we need to keep up to date with.
Yeah, just Andy's raised a helpful point about trying to do some national training. I suppose the Sit for Pensions network would be reasonably close to that. So we do have access to the pensions network, and of course board members are allowed to go on workshops. So I'm saying that, but hopefully that is the case.
I was thinking in terms of like also that chances are that it will be the same 2 or 3 firms of actuaries supplying training, very similar training to boards across the length and breadth of the country. Chances are it's a template bit of training where they've just done a drag and drop for local needs, and everyone's paying for that training over and over again when it's only been really written once. So it'd be very useful to sort of like use a bit of economies of scale if we could employ it.
Well, perhaps we move on tomorrow to a Kingston and Sutton joint session, but that'll be logistically challenging, I'm sure.
All right, okay, perhaps I'm stepping too far in front. I'll get back in my box.
So, point well made. It's the providers who make the money out of the drag and drop, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, Tamara, does that give you enough sort of feedback to go on with? And
Chair, can I just ask you to read the recommendation on this one, because it is for the plan as well, please.
So the recommendation is, thank you, Sharon, to note the results of the National OGPS Knowledge Assessment and to approve the training plan for the board proposed within the report, with consideration being given to an additional session on the pension board's role in governance, something like that.
So now you've added that an additional part to that recommendation for consideration of the board's role in governance. Could someone just second that motion, please?
I'll second it.
Thank you, and then you can go to the vote. Lovely, thank you.
Okay, is everyone happy with that?
Great.
Yeah, well, we'll take it. Michael and Chris, can you quickly unmute?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's fine.
Yeah. Thank you. That's a great thumbs up from Michael. So, yeah, okay, so we're fine on that. Thanks, Sharon, for the reminder. Right, moving on to the next item, which is the review of work programme.
So I think you've already added a couple of items to that work programme. So a review of the custodian's approach to cybersecurity and trying to get some sort of interaction with the London Civ in a more governance focused role. We can try and add that to the next meeting agenda. Are there any other comments on the proposed work programme for the next two meetings?
I mean, the one that we've outside the board for board members, myself, Tamara, and a guy called John Raisin, who you may remember, is the completion and the review of governance against the Code of Practice 14. That's a bit fluid, isn't it, Tamara, in terms of delivery on that one?
Yeah, so we said we couldn't really commission that until the new pensions admin manager was in role and kind of reasonably settled and able to work with John on that review. And we were hoping at that point that we might be able to not do it remotely, because obviously that adds a bit of time and stress to the process of a kind of, it's almost like it approach. But I don't think we can wait for the resumption of physical meetings. I think we're going to have to go ahead on the basis that it will have to be done largely remotely. But at least now that Andy is in role, hopefully Bradley, Andy and I can agree a time frame for getting that piece of work underway. And then the other suggestion was that potentially we make this a joint piece of work with Kingston, given that the pensions admin team are working across both boroughs as a shared service. And Kingston obviously will be interested in the same outcomes and outputs of this review. So I just wanted to check that there were no objections from the board to making it a joint review with Kingston.
I'm happy with that. It seems spreads the cost.
And Bradley's just noted we can't really discuss the output of that review in January. I think all we can do at the January meeting is hopefully scope and confirm what work will be done, rather than try and be reviewing results of that piece of work.
So we're looking at probably March for that one, hopefully.
For the outputs, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's fine. But I think otherwise we've got a pretty full agenda. The member training in January, would you pick up the first? I'm trying to think, the procurement. What was the first item on from the national skill?
I need to go back to to the previous paper. The impact of COVID-19 on the fund and actuarial methods was what was proposed in the training plan. And actually, I think that actuarial methods piece is quite important, because we will be starting the procurement process for the new actuarial contracts at the beginning of next year. And it'll be quite important for that procurement process to have a good understanding of the differences between the various actuaries and their actuarial approaches. So what it actually means in practice to have a Hyman's actuary versus the Barnett-Waddingham actuary, what financial impact that actually makes, not just the sort of day-to-day admin impact, but it does have an impact on how they do their valuations, and therefore what the results are.
Well, let's see if we can make that out. I mean, it is critical. Could that be done as a joint thing? It'd be an online thing, couldn't it? So You know,
Mhm.
maybe we could do that of an evening. But I'll leave you
Yeah,
to
we could.
that. I'll leave you to think about that. The only other thing I had rattling around in my head is, and I've lost touch a little bit. You know, the section 13 GAD review, where the government actuary comes along and says, you spent all this money on actuaries and we don't believe the results, we'll do our own thing. Is that due at some point?
The actuaries, the actuaries were talking about it and completing their work on it. I'm not aware that there's been any comeback.
No, I mean, I'd like the results. We had the results back at the board before, and that does bring out, doesn't it, your point about, you know, where does our Hyman's particularly cautious on the discount rate compared to others? That brings out that quite nicely. Could you just put that on with a date to be determined, you know, the section 13 GAD review, just put it floating around with a TB, and then we could add that. Andy's raised a point about prudence and how that will impact on employer. Is that prudence on the discount rate, Andy?
Potentially, or it could be prudence in other areas. Perhaps, you know, it could be longevity or other areas. Really, it's sort of it's a general attitude to risk. If you've got one actuary that's slightly more prudent and the other is more risk averse, obviously it depends on our attitude to risk as well. But it's always really important that where you might be saving a few thousand on, you know, the cost of the actuary, their attitude to risk will have a disproportionate effect on your employer rate. So your economies need to be balanced in that way.
Okay, you change your actuary with trepidation, is my experience.
Yeah, I'm a newbie, so I don't want to press too hard at this point. So I'm just flagging it.
Yeah. Okay. Anything more on that one tomorrow on the work plan? Any other member, or we're okay? We've got a good work plan there going forward. Okay. Now, do I have a recommendation, Sharon, on that one? To agree the work programme for the board for the next 2 meetings, with the addition of the section 13 GAD review, date to be determined.
And again, we just need to just get that additional part of the recommendation seconded, please.
Seconded.
Yeah, and Michael, Chris, can I ask you to unmute? And Angela normally sends me a little note.
Yeah, it's fine. Fine with me.
Yeah, Chris is all right.
I'll do it verbally this time, agreed.
Yeah, well done, Angela. I think we got Michael's in his kind of Lake District. I think we got a majority.
Lovely, thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. That brings us on to any urgent business. I've not been notified of anything. No. Oh, Victoria.
Hello, it's not really urgent business, but I thought it might be the time to note that we have appointed to the role of Head of Pensions Investment Team that Tamara is currently fulfilling for us. So our new starter, Andrienne, will be joining us on the 1st of December. And we have a good period of handover with Tamara and Andrienne both being with us throughout December. But I just wanted to formally thank Tamara for all of her hard work with us here, because I believe this is probably the last pensions board that Tamara will be with us. So I thought it would be worth noting now. And thanks again, Tamara, for all your support over the last few months.
Thanks to me, Tamara. People don't see outside these meetings, but I've had a number of conversations with Tamara, and I found it absolutely exceptional. So I'm sure we'll miss you. Is that Adrian Myers, by the way?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, but Tamara, I wish you well for the future if we don't see you again, and thanks for everything you've done for us. Thank you. Exclusion of press and public. I presume I don't need to If there's any public listening, oh, I better not say.
I just added that in case you needed to go into exempt session regarding those exempt papers, but it sounds like you don't need to discuss that at the moment.
Okay, well, thank you everyone you've made my job easy. I can go and have a cup of tea now, so thank you for that. And well.